When I first booked my ticket to Brazil, it wasn't to move here. I was only planning to be here for a week. I was planning to come for Carnival. And like so many people around the world, I had spent years seeing the videos, hearing the stories about Carnival, and wondering what it would feel like to experience one of the biggest celebrations on the planet, literally in person. I wanted the music, the samba, the energy, the beaches, the colors, the culture, and yes, even some of the parties. I thought Brazil was going to be a memorable trip, an exciting week before I packed my bags and continued on to the next stop on my journey. Then somehow, a week turned into a few weeks, which then turned into a few months. One extension of my time became another one after another one. I moved from one Airbnb into another Airbnb, from one neighborhood to other neighborhoods, and before I knew it, I wasn't planning the end of my trip. I was figuring out where I wanted to move to next inside the country, at least for as long as my visa extended for. Now, looking back, I don't think it happened because I fell in love with one specific place. Brazil is so large that every city felt like a completely different experience. Rio introduced me to a side of the country that was energetic, fast-paced, and almost impossible to slow down during Carnival. São Paulo felt completely different. It was like endless movement, big buildings, and like neighborhoods that each had their own personality. It gave like a big New York type of vibe. And then I arrived in Salvador and a lot shifted, It wasn't something that was like big and dramatic. It wasn't just one life-changing conversation or unforgettable moment. It was a feeling. It was something that words can't quite explain, Because somewhere between my daily walks and sitting by the ocean, grocery shopping, working from different spaces, sightseeing, I realized that I kind of stopped counting down the days until I was going to leave. And I allowed myself to learn how to be present in being in this space. Because Brazil has a way of pulling you in. It's like 1 minute you're telling yourself you'll stay just another week. And then the next you're looking for another apartment, figuring out that new neighborhood that you're moving to. And you're building a routine, in a place that you never imagined staying in that long. And I think a part of that is because life in Brazil moves differently, especially in Salvador. But even in the middle of large cities, there was a pace that allowed my nervous system to breathe. People sat outside together for hours. Conversations didn't feel rushed. Friends gathered without looking like they had somewhere more important to be. Families walked along the beach after sunset. There wasn't this constant pressure to squeeze every ounce of productivity out of every single day. People sat at restaurants and truly enjoyed each other, so much that most of the meals in Brazil are priced for 2 or 3 people. And then you have the menu for solo individuals. And when I first arrived, I appreciated all of that about Brazil, at least from what I had already knew then. But now that it's time for me to leave, I realized that Brazil truly changed me. Because the truth is, I didn't just stay longer than I planned. I stayed long enough to realize how much of my old life I had unknowingly packed inside my suitcases as well. And I'm not talking about my clothes or my cameras. I'm talking about expectations, pressure, guilt. The belief that every decision had to be justified. The feeling that constantly needing to be producing something in order to deserve the life I had built. I had to sit with that. And as I pack up on my last day in Brazil, I pack everything back into those same suitcases. And it's strange realizing that almost nothing inside of me is leaving the same way that it arrived. My luggage weighs about the same, but I don't. And I also think, one of the things that people don't talk about enough when it comes to moving abroad is that changing your location doesn't automatically change your relationship with yourself. Before I came here, I think a small part of me believed that if I could just build a life in another country, that some of that heaviness that I had been carrying would naturally disappear. And not because I thought that it would magically fix anything, but because I assumed a new environment would make it easier to leave certain parts of myself behind. But instead, being here has taught me something much more valuable. You don't stop carrying emotional weight because you cross the border. You stop carrying it when you decide it no longer belongs to you. When you're in a space where you're, safe enough to be able to drop it and let it be. And there were so many moments over these last several months when I found myself reflecting on decisions I had made long before I ever boarded that flight. Relationships that had ended, family dynamics that I couldn't change, friendships I had outgrown, business decisions that hadn't worked out the way I hoped, financial choices that still had consequences, dreams that looked different than I imagined they would. For a long time, I treated those experiences like evidence that I had somehow failed. I replayed conversations in my head. I questioned whether I should have stayed longer, tried harder, explained myself differently, or chosen another path altogether. Even after making peace with my decisions intellectually, I realized there was still an emotional attachment that kept pulling me backwards. The interesting thing about traveling is that it creates distance. And sometimes distance allows you to see your life more clearly. When you're removed from the people, the routines, and even the places connected to certain memories, you begin to reorganize and recognize which thoughts you're choosing to keep alive. I realized that some of the weight I was carrying wasn't coming from my circumstances anymore. It was coming from my unwillingness to stop revisiting them. That was a difficult realization because it meant nobody else could put that weight down for me. I had to make that decision myself. Financially, Brazil stretched me in ways I expected and in ways that I didn't. You see the beaches, the cafes, and the beautiful apartments and the sunsets, but there's other pieces that gets added onto that experience. Hidden fees and costs that you may have not known that you're going to have to go through, or even experiences that you have to go through, different loops and hoops. You're learning along the way. It's all unexpected. And then you also have the reality of rebuilding your life every time you arrive somewhere new. It's like freedom has a cost. Sometimes it's financial, sometimes it's emotional, and sometimes it's the uncertainty of not knowing exactly what comes next. There were moments when I questioned myself, moments when I wondered if I had been irresponsible for choosing experiences over stability. Moments when I compared my life to people back home who had mortgages, careers that looked more predictable, and routines that made sense on paper. Then I would remind myself why I left in the first place. I wasn't unhappy because I lacked stability. I was unhappy because I was living a life that no longer felt like mine. I had spent years doing what I thought I was supposed to do. Checking the boxes, accomplishing goals, collecting degrees, building businesses, chasing the version of success I thought would eventually make everything click. And instead I found myself wondering why I had worked so hard to build a life that left so little room to actually enjoy it. Brazil didn't answer every question that I have about my future, but what it did help me become more comfortable not needing every answer right now. And that's a different way of living. I've realized that uncertainty isn't always something to solve. Sometimes it's simply the space between who you've been and who you're becoming. We tend to rush through that space because it feels uncomfortable. But some of the most meaningful growth in my life has happened when I stopped trying to force clarity and simply allowed myself to experience what was in front of me. I think that's why this last day feels emotional. you know, but it's not in the way that I expected. Because I'm not crying, you know, because I'm leaving Brazil. When it's time, my body knows when it's time. But I am emotional because I recognize the woman who is leaving. She's lighter. And she's lighter not because life suddenly became easier, but because she finally stopped volunteering to carry everything. She stopped believing that she had to earn rest. She stopped believing every season needed to produce something extraordinary. She stopped believing that slowing down meant she was falling behind. She stopped apologizing to herself for choosing a life that looks different. She stopped apologizing for when she couldn't show up for others. And somewhere in the middle of all of that, she remembered how to simply be present. That's probably the lesson I'll carry with me more than anything else. Presence. Not constantly thinking about where I'll be 6 months from now. Hell, next month. Not replaying what happened 6 years ago. Not measuring today against someone else's timeline. Just in the present. And then there were my locks. I know for a lot of people, cutting your hair is just cutting your hair. But for me, it wasn't. By the time I made that decision, I wasn't reacting to one bad day or chasing a dramatic change. The decision came after months of recognizing that I had been evolving internally in ways that no longer matched the image I saw looking back at me in the mirror. My locks had been part of my identity for years. They traveled with me through different versions of myself. They were there through accomplishments, disappointments, grief, excitement, and new beginnings. And letting them go wasn't about rejecting those years. It was about honoring them while also giving myself permission to move forward without feeling obligated to remain recognizable to the person I used to be. And I love that about myself. And as I zip up these suitcases one last time, I can't help but smile at how symbolic this moment feels. The luggage weighs almost the same as it did when I arrived, but I don't. I'm lighter. I feel freer. I feel more aligned with myself. And as I prepare to journey across another border into another country, I'm taking with me those lessons that I learned when it comes to me being present in the moment and not always having to have everything planned. It was a sense of reinforcement and it was a sense of healing. I thank you for tuning into this video. Definitely leave your comments, questions down below in the comments.